Hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, just as the thumbnail suggested, Steamforge Games was kind enough to send me an early release copy of the Warmachine two-player starter set. So we are going to be unboxing that today. So first up, massive shout out to Steamforge Games. Super appreciate you guys sending me out a copy for me to review for everyone. And also, if you're new here, make sure that you click the like button if you've seen some of my videos and you like the content. Also, make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss any new updates. So, as you can tell, I've even left the shrink wrap on. I literally just got this in the mail last night. Unfortunately, it was a couple of days after the press embargo had lifted, but this is an exciting box set for Warmachine. So one, it's the first time that Warmachine models have been produced in HIPS plastic. So for people that aren't familiar with HIPS, that's the sort of plastic that a lot of manufacturers like Games Workshop and Warlord Games produce a lot of their figure kits in. Very easy to work with. You can use plastic glue with it and so forth. But then also, this box is going to retail for, I think, $99.99 USD, so $100, which means you're getting two complete command starters in the box at a significant discount because the individual resin printed command starters are actually a little bit more expensive. So, for instance, the Command Cadre box for the Cygnar Storm Legion, which has a somewhat similar composition, that box is $99 on its own. So this is a significant savings for people that are looking to get into this new Warmachine experience under Steamforge Games leadership. And especially if you have a friend that you can split this with, you know, you're each paying 50 bucks. So let's go down to the hobby desk. We'll crack this open, take a look at the components, and then at the very end, I'll assemble the miniatures and show you what everything looks like. So let's go ahead and cut this open, get this plastic out of here. And we'll use a little movie magic. So 1, 2, 3, go. All right, so first up in the box, we've got some cool little insert here with QR codes to get you pointed to the Discord, as well as to get you to the app on the Google and Apple app stores. So very important for you to actually play the game. The app is where you can get your rules and all of your unit profiles and so forth. And then it's also really helpful to join the Steamforge community. You can get community updates as well as talk to the community. And even they have a creator channel so that when people like myself create new videos, if you're interested in Warmachine specifically, a lot of us will post our content on their Discord. Now, with that out of the way, we've also got sprues. Lots and lots of sprues. I forgot to actually show you guys, there was actually a bulge in the box for how crammed everything was in there. And I did have a couple of pieces that had snapped off. So, you know, Steamforge, if you're watching, you might want to rework the packaging a little bit. But one of the great things about HIPS plastic is that it's super durable. You just want to be careful when you're opening your box so, you know, you don't lose any pieces that might have snapped off on the floor. But let's take a look at these sprues one by one. All right, now I didn't mention it in the intro, but you actually do get a frame with some terrain in the box. Now, it's not a ton of terrain, so you've got 4 walls along the outside of the frame, and then it looks like these are maybe little ponds. There's like little ripple effects that are like sculpted into it. That's it. for the terrain. So it's a nice inclusion, especially if you're playing at that command starter level. This is, for a 30-point game, enough terrain for you to really get started. Like, if I hear Ash Barker calls it the Christmas morning test, if you were to crack open this box with like your brother, sister, friend, whatever on a holiday, and you really wanted to just play the game right then and there, after you get everything assembled, this terrain will get you started. Now, you're definitely in the future going to want to add more terrain, but again, for a starter set, this is a very nice inclusion. All right, so next up, we have the frame for the Khador Razor Warjack. Now, this is a character Warjack. In fact, every model in this box is a character, so I should point out you only ever need to buy this box once. There's really no point to buying a duplicate, but I am liking what I'm seeing here. So a lot of the pieces have keys and sockets molded into them, so it should be relatively easy to put together. And I'm not seeing any crazy mold lines outside of what you would expect from like an equivalent Games Workshop kit. So, along this center line, if you cut straight through here, there's going to be some mold lines that you can scrape off very easily with the back end of a hobby knife. So we'll set this frame aside. All right, so next up we have two frames down here. So these two frames are going to build your Sergeant Lazarenko, the Jackal. He's a character solo. And then it's also going to build our character unit, the Hounds. So without looking at the instructions, I'm not entirely sure if, the parts are intermixed, and I kind of feel like they have to be, because there's one shield here and then two shields on this sprue, and the Hounds, everybody has a shield. So for infantry, it looks like we've got quite a few pieces to build an individual model. However, it does look like the pieces are still keyed and should slot together pretty well. I will also say that these new sculpts for these commandos are way better than the old commando sculpts that we had for Warmachine back in the day. Khador is one of my favorite armies, and I never bought the old assault commandos because they just looked absolutely horrible. The new sculpts that we have for the Hounds, and I'm assuming the new incarnation of the commandos that will inevitably come at some point in the future, if they look like the Hounds, they're going to look absolutely incredible. That was actually the one unit in this box that I was super excited for. Now, on the Cygnar side of the house, we've got two Sprues again, and it looks like everything is intermixed between these two Sprues. So we're going to have the Black 13th Gun Mage character unit. We're going to have our Warcaster, and then we're also going to have our Cygnar character Jack, the Deuce. All right, so here we go with some close-ups. It looks like this sprue is primarily the Black 13th. And again, same positives. I'm seeing lots of keyed pieces, so things should slot together very, very easy. I'm also incredibly ecstatic that I'll be able to use plastic glue on these. And then it looks like this sprue is going to be Deuce and Kane for the most part. And then my two pieces that I've broken off, one half was part of the Deuce's gun, and then the other half appears to be part of the Warjack's body. So as you can see, because these are, hips plastic, there was no damage to the parts. They just snapped off of the frames because of how tightly packed the box was. But just as a note here, I might have to zoom in and post. but the inscriptions, the runic inscriptions on the gun barrel turned out phenomenal. So you'll be able to run like some enamel paint, or if you add some flow improver to your acrylics and get some really nice like glowing effects down in there really easy. Those look awesome. All right, so now this little sheet that I showed you guys in the beginning, this QR code is how you get your instructions. There's no instructions in the box. Now, the site that that links to isn't live yet on the Steamforge Games website. So I'm going to transition away, attempt to build these without instructions, and I'll come back, show you the finished models hopefully, and we'll wrap this up. All right, so we're back here with some finished models. I did manage to get everything built without the instructions, and I only made one mistake. But one thing that I noticed halfway through building the models is that on the frames, and I don't know how well the camera's going to pick this up, but so everything is not only numbered, which I assume will correlate to the instructions, which I have not seen, but each individual model is also lettered. So that way, even if you didn't have the instructions, you'd be able to, know all of the pieces that make one model and, clip those out, set it aside, and kind of Lego figure it out and put it together. Now, I will say that as far as difficulty for getting everything built, I'd put it somewhere in between a Games Workshop kit and like a Malifaux or a Marvel Crisis Protocol kit. And the reason why I say that, putting it together was very easy. So it had that in common with Games Workshop. Everything was keyed very, very well. It's nigh impossible to put pieces with the wrong models and so forth. But the one thing that, brings it kind of closer to the difficulty of a Malifaux kit is just the number of pieces per model. So there are some models here, like I'm looking right here, whichever model K was, had 22 pieces. Oh, that was the Khador Warcaster. There's 22 pieces to make, a model on a 30 millimeter base. Now, again, it wasn't hard. Everything, keyed together very, very well. There really wasn't any time that I was confused. So if you're a beginner and this is like your first miniature kit that you're ever putting together, you could do it easily, but there are a lot of parts. The other thing I will mention is that there's also a lot of tiny parts. So like the shoulder pads for the infantry, for example, those are all separate, pieces. And when you got chunky fingers like I do, it can kind of be hard to get a grip on them. So make sure you work in an area where, if you happen to drop something, you'll be able to find it easy. But with all of that out of the way, let's actually take a look at some models. So we've got the Razor Warjack here, which this is one of my favorite miniatures from the whole kit. This chainsaw shield is absolutely awesome. Really great detail, like all the rivets and everything look really, really good. I do highly recommend that as you're building it, you take care of the mold lines, because once it's built, you'll see like a lot of these areas, it's not really feasible to get like a hobby knife in there and scrape them after the fact. Now, because everything is keyed very well, if you wanted to paint, honestly, almost any of the miniatures in sub-assemblies, you could. I just went ahead and put everything together. Whenever I have miniatures like this, if there's somewhere that's deep shadow, I'll normally prime the model in black and then just not paint those areas because you're really not going to see them anyway. All right, so next up we've got our Warcaster, who is... Sorry, I don't know everybody's names yet. Capitan Vicul. So this miniature is probably my absolute favorite out of the whole kit. He is just loaded to bear with magical axes, throwing axes. He's got 5 of them on him and a dagger in case he runs out of axes. He just looks absolutely incredible. This is one of the better tactical rocks that I've ever seen in my life. Absolutely gorgeous miniature. Can't wait to get him painted. Right, next up, we've got Sergeant Lazarenko, the Jackal. He's our character solo. Now, one thing that was cool with this miniature is that some of the pieces are actually optional. So all of the sort of effects, so the smoke that's coming off of the warjack head that he's standing on, the missile with the fire plume, and then the exhaust plume on the back, those are all optional components. So if you were a new player and, maybe you were apprehensive about painting those bits, you don't actually have to put them on, and the model still looks great without them. They're completely optional. But I do highly encourage you to put them on because look at this miniature. It's absolutely fantastic. All right, and then last up, we have our character unit, the Hounds. So we've got 3 people here. Show you the first 2 first. Now, again, if you wanted to paint these in sub-assemblies, you could very easily just leave the shield off, or you could use my method, prime it black, and then don't worry about painting behind the shields. But the level of details on these guys are absolutely gorgeous. They look miles better than the old Assault Commandos. I'll see if I can throw up an image of what the old Privateer Press ones look like. They were not good. Then here's our machine gunner. Really loving just all of the detail, down to the gas mask, the goggles, the ammo feed. Everything just looks absolutely awesome. All right, let me clear away the Khador and we'll break out the Cygnar. So first up, we've got our Warjack for the Force, Deuce. Now, this was the model where there was one part where I couldn't figure out where in the world it went to. I'll try and hold that up to the camera. So I actually built this model first, couldn't figure out where this went, and then got like halfway through, and then I realized it connects to the side of the head, but it's hidden by part of the chassis. So the connector piece for the head is like buried into the body to lock it into place. And the glue had set for too long. It was impossible to like pry the chassis apart to get that piece in. But luckily it's kind of hidden like in this deep shadow. So it's not going to affect the final look of the miniature all that much. But I'm loving the design here. All of the details are super crisp. And that runic scripting on the barrels, like we were talking about before, really, really good. That's going to look really nice with like a glowing pigment ran down in there. So overall, really impressed with the Deuce. Now, his Warcaster, we've got Kane. Now, Kane was one of the few miniatures that had alternate pieces. So you could use pistols that had the smoke from being recently fired, and then this sort of propellant blast, or you could just use plain pistols with no special effects. Again, highly encourage any new players to go ahead and try and push yourself and paint those. Those are some fairly simple effects to do with the modern paints that we have available to us. But awesome, dynamically posed. His tactical rock's not as cool as the Khador Warcaster, but it's not bad. Now, next up, we've got our reimagined Black 13th character unit. I'm really impressed with these guys. The dynamic posing and everything is absolutely incredible. I'd have to say, out of the three of them, this one's probably my favorite. You know, you can almost imagine her like running and then hearing something behind her and turning around to take a shot. Very awesome, dynamically posed model. And the other thing I want to say is even though there's a lot of detail here, it's all really, really chunky. So it's actually going to be somewhat easy to paint and look really, really great once it's done. And here's our last member, who appears to have lost one of his pistols and is now relying on his combat blade. And last but not least, we have Captain Bastian Folk. Now, without instructions, figuring out what to do for his back was a little bit challenging. That was before I realized that all of the individual miniatures were lettered. So I didn't have this part of his cloak clipped out, and it just looked really, really off. And actually building him is what led me to figure out that everybody was individually lettered. But another cool miniature with his scattergun, and even these smaller arms, it's not just on the warjack, but they have the runic scripting on their barrels as well. So very, very cool. Very excited to get these painted up and put on the table. There is the new Warmachine 2-player starter set. Some final thoughts on the box. I am actually very, very impressed with the quality of these plastic miniatures, which is to be expected. Steamforged Games has been making a lot of tabletop RPG miniatures for years. So they definitely have the talent and the skill in-house to produce incredible miniatures. And they've knocked it out the park with this release as well. All of the sculpts are absolutely fantastic. And honestly, this is probably the best way, if you're a fan of Cygnar or Khador, to pitch in with a friend and get started playing the game. Now, one thing I will bring up again, the number of pieces in the kit for each individual miniature might seem a little bit daunting. But again, with everything being keyed, it makes that assembly, once you get everything clipped out and cleaned, quick and simple. So don't let that scare you away. These were actually really easy to put together. I was initially surprised by the number of parts, but thankfully we weren't doing anything, say, like building faces out of 4 parts, which I've had to do with other plastic kits that were like super dynamically posed from, say, Atomic Mass Games for Marvel Crisis Protocol or Malifaux. So we didn't have anything like that here. There were some little fiddly bits, like I mentioned, the shoulder pads. So you do want to be careful with those. But again, absolutely everything was keyed. Even those little tiny, tiny parts where they connect on the miniature actually had the key post, as well as the, how the frames were designed. They were actually designed very intelligently. So all of the parts for an individual miniature are grouped together on the sprue, which was helping me initially without the instructions. But then they're also lettered so that, now that I know, any plastic kits that might get released in the future, you almost don't even need the instructions as long as they're made to this same quality. Another thing that I want to mention is that the price for this set, I feel, is actually priced very, very reasonably. So since this is meant for 2 players to play out of the box, more than likely you're going to be splitting the cost, which means you're getting your half of the starter set for only $50 USD, and that's before you even consider that, you can get discounts from third-party retailers and so forth that are going to bring that cost down a little bit more. All of the rules are available for free in the app. So, I mean, this is probably one of the cheapest, intro starter sets for any war game that I've seen in recent history. The only, downside is you have to be interested in either Cygnar or Khador. I don't have any insider knowledge, but I don't expect that we would see another two-player starter set with like different factions. But I do hope that this might be indicative that the plastic kits that might be coming in the future might be a little bit lower priced than the 3D printed kits that we've been seeing right now. They're not the most expensive kits on the market, but, having access to a nice chunk of your force, this is a 30-point starter, and, the full war game is played at 100 points. So it's roughly a third of your force. Being able to get that for a really good price is actually really, really helpful for new players and for existing players that are looking to expand their collection. Right, so that's really all I've got to say about this kit for this unboxing video. Let me know down in the comments which force you would like to see me paint first. I'm actually, as soon as I'm done with this and I edit this and get it out on YouTube, because I am running a little bit behind, I'm going to immediately take these to go prime them. And I want to know down in the comments which force you want to see the painting video for first. Since this is the two-player starter set, it's kind of intended for newer players. Those painting videos are going to be, not like super detailed with complex techniques and everything. I'm going to try and make it a very beginner-friendly paint job. So if you're interested and you see the video, let me know down in the comments which force you want to see first. Personally, I'm really excited for the Khador, but I also do have a Cygnar army that I'm working on, and these Cygnar models are absolutely gorgeous as well. I played Khador since like way back at the beginning of Mark III. They've been one of my favorite factions for a very long time after the poor retribution of Syra, who sadly don't really exist anymore. But yeah, let me know down below. That's all for today, guys, and I will catch you all in the next video.